Thank you very much for all of the comments that came through after the question that I posed to the group regarding plywood versus fiberglass in covering the doghouse, making the doghouse roof. It has changed my mind about how to do this project. My name is Matt. Follow along as I turn Duracell, the legendary ocean racing sailboat, into a comfortable cruising home. It's been quite the progression of ideas over the past week. I posed the question in the first place because I've been thinking about this project, specifically building this doghouse, for a couple of years now, ever since we kind of started getting interested in taking over this project. And what I tend to do is I get into these I get an idea of how I want to do something, and then I get into like a thought kind of rut, and I have a hard time getting out of that idea path. And so it's really, really helpful for me to get perspectives from the outside and just, ideas from other people about how to do things. To refresh your memory, what needs to happen is I need to build a foam cord part that makes the roof of the doghouse. So there's an inside skin, foam in the sandwich, and then fiberglass on the outside. And so the question was whether the inside skin of my foam cord piece should be plywood or fiberglass. For a long time, I've been pretty convinced that I was going to use plywood because I really liked the idea of varnishing the inside of the doghouse, so when you look up when you're inside the doghouse, you'll see this pretty varnished overhead. But pretty quickly it became clear that Yannika is not interested in having a varnished overhead. She wants white. So, but that would also lend itself to using plywood, because plywood is already, I wouldn't have to do much fairing. It would be easy to prime and paint. But when it came to the logistics of using plywood, it was really difficult to figure out exactly the order of operations to make it happen, and make it happen in a really quality manner. So what I was worried about was I was thinking that the plywood would need to be bent over the doghouse in 4 sheets, and then I would bend, and I would just fasten it to this structure, and then I would bend over the foam over the plywood and glue the foam to the plywood that way. I got really worried that, first of all, the plywood wouldn't match up with the plywood sheet wouldn't match up with each other, so I could scarf them, so that would fix that. But then I was also worried that when I laid over the foam onto the plywood, it wouldn't adhere very well. There would be lots of voids. Because it's a bent part, there's this curve that would, plywood doesn't bend exactly the same way that foam bends. So then I thought, well, maybe I should just lay the foam out in one big piece on the floor in the garage and put the plywood down onto the foam, and then bend the whole thing over in one part. The problem was I didn't know for sure that it would bend. It's not a crazy curve, but it's a big enough curve that when I just bend the foam over, the foam feels like it's at its limit. So it was hard to know that the plywood would, with the foam attached to it, would work bending that way. A couple of you on our YouTube channel suggested that I do a test panel with fiberglass. So I was not convinced that attaching the plywood to the foam and bending it over wouldn't basically do damage to the whole thing. I don't have any 6 mil plywood on hand, so I couldn't make a test piece, and I wasn't going to go spend $75 on on one sheet of plywood just to test it out. So the next idea, another idea that we had, was to bend the foam over the whole doghouse by itself and then laminate over the top of the doghouse with the foam on it. Then put some like formers, I think what you would call formers, to hold the piece in shape. Take the whole thing off, take it to the shop, and then laminate the inside with fiberglass. And then I could fair and paint the inside of the doghouse, of the roof, in the shop, which would be a lot easier than having to, for instance, fair over my head with the whole thing installed. Another person on our channel commented that that sounds like a lot of work and it could be done easier. What if you made a test strip of fiberglass on the foam and see if it bends over just with one side laminated, and then you could put the whole thing over with just one side and then laminate the other side once it was over the doghouse. So that's what I did. I took a piece of foam of the same thickness and laminated 2 sheets of 1708 to it with epoxy, let it cured. And right here at the top here, at kind of the crown of the roof, it bends over just fine. And it actually feels even better bending it this way than just the foam itself. It doesn't feel as though it's going to break when I bend the foam over. Like I said, when I was just bending the foam over, it felt like it was at its limits. So what we decided is that I'm basically going to glue the entire roof together, all the foam, in one big piece on the floor in the shop, and then laminate over the whole thing. And that's going to be the inside skin of the doghouse roof. And then we'll bend that over the roof, maybe even tape it to the roof, and then laminate over the top. And I'm going to vacuum bag the fiberglass to the inside on the shop floor. The vacuum bag the fiberglass to the foam. So I just have a really, really great adhesion, no voids. It will be really, really flat, so it'll be a lot easier to fair. And another, I should have said earlier, another really great thing about this is that about using fiberglass is it will keep it light, and that is something that we should really be striving for in this project, is to keep the boat light. So whereas plywood would be a bit heavier. So that's what we've decided. Yeah. So first we needed to finish the structure in the deck beams that will help support the roof as I'm building it. So I added another plate to the other side of each deck beam, and then my dad was there to help cut out grooves for stringers that were going to go fore and aft between the deck beams that help support the structure of the roof. So I got these notches cut. Dad cut the notches in each of these beam ends, or like the beam covers. And so the stringers will go between them and just fit inside each of these notches. And it'll just help support the foam when we form it over. Then I got the foam ready for gluing it all together. I cut 45-degree chamfers in the ends of the foam, so it would be more like a scarf when I was gluing most of these foam pieces together to make it a little bit stronger. Cheers, cheers, thanks for your help. What I've decided to do is I'm going to glue all my pieces of foam together that will cover the entire coach roof of the doghouse. And then I'm going to laminate them all, just one side of it, and vacuum bag it and let it cure all in the shop. So it's all, I'm going to do it all on the floor right here. It's a huge piece. It's almost 8 feet by 14 feet long. And so I've got my foam that's already cut to shape and everything. So tonight what we're going to do is just glue the pieces of foam together. So I'm just going to put epoxy on the edges and basically just stick them together. Mix this stuff up with my colloidal silica to thicken it.
This is why we wear the masks.
This is the last piece.
I let the epoxy cure overnight that held the big pieces of foam together. I now had one giant piece that was ready to be laminated. So the plan was to laminate one side of the foam on the floor. This is by far the biggest lamination I'd ever done, as well as the biggest vacuum bag project I'd ever done. And as you've seen before, I saturate the foam with epoxy, lay out the fiberglass, wet out the fiberglass, and get it all rolled out so that there are no voids and it's all saturated. Then we lay down the peel ply, which absorbs resin as well as leaves a nice texture so I don't have to sand when I'm all done. On top of the peel ply goes this breather cloth, and it serves two purposes. One is that it absorbs excess resin, and then the other is that it helps air travel through the bag. And then finally we lay down the bag itself, which is just basically a big piece of plastic that is sealed to the part around the part that I'm going to make. And what it does is we pull a vacuum on this bag and it presses onto the fiberglass and the resin, and so it presses out as much epoxy as possible so that there's as little resin to fiberglass as possible, making it very light, very strong, and hopefully very flat.
got one more to do over there.
I love vacuum bagging because I don't know, I know I'm making a really strong light part, and this is like the fun part where it's like I've done the whole project, I've laid it all out, and now I'm pulling the vacuum on the part, and it's like kind of this mad rush to make sure that I'm you know, everything's all sealed up and everything, and then I kind of start to see the resin flow. So see how it goes. Just a short Mast update for you. As you know, last weekend we went down to LA to check out this potential mast that's down in Long Beach. And we were pretty disappointed to find that there were no spreaders there. As it turns out, it's pretty expensive to have new spreaders made. And so we are still thinking about it, still figuring out what our options are. But in the meantime, we'll keep you updated about what happens with the mast. We also have 3 more Patreons to thank this week. If you're interested in joining the community, visit our Patreon page. It's the Duracell Project there on Patreon. So huge thanks to my very good friend Nichols. And also thank you to Jake, who's our first local Patreon, we believe. And we'll look forward to meeting you soon, Jake. And also from the Prairie. And thanks again so much. It's awesome to get the motivation to help to keep us working on these videos for y'all. So thanks again.